Welcome to Married to History, where we try to be informative, entertaining, and family friendly.
Aloha, I'm Christopher. I have a fancy piece of paper on my wall that says that I know more about history than most people do.
I'm Shirley. I'm a homeschool mom that relies on good curriculum, Christopher, and hairspray to teach our kids history. Hey, honey, I have a history question for you.
I love history questions.
And actually, I want to make this a part of a new series.
New series.
The new series is going to be titled Unimaginative War Names. So my question is...
Unimaginative warnings?
War names.
Oh, unimaginative war names.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so our first question in the series is, was the 100 Years' War really 100 years?
Yes.
Was it really?
Yes.
Like exactly like to the day?
No.
Well then, come on now.
Okay.
Follow-up question. Oh. It was a freaking 100 years. That's a long time. That's like a couple generations.
Yes.
They couldn't think of anything else about this war that stood out to give it a name. Like there was literally nothing else interesting or noteworthy that happened in this, or like even calling it by the sides that fought in it, that they had to call it 100 years. And what did they call it before those 100 years were over? Like when they were still in the middle of it, they couldn't have called it 100 Years' War because they didn't know when it was going to end. Right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is often a thing with wars. We today call wars by names that they were often not called at the time because
clearly
there were obvious reasons for why they wouldn't have any reason of knowing that, oh, let's call this one World War I, or ooh, let's call this one the First Battle of Bull Run.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
Good example.
Okay, so a couple of things that I think are probably going to blow your mind on this one.
I can't wait.
First off, yes, indeed, it was fought over a period that more or less was about 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, no, they did not call it the 100 Years' War at the time. And I'll be honest, I don't know what they called it at the time. They might... common titles of the time were the War of such and such succession, meaning that somebody was trying to become king or something of that nature. Another common one would be the War of this year, or the War of this season, or the this King's War. There are lots of different common names that they could have given to it. So the name the 100 Years' War, if I'm remembering correctly, was not given to this period until the 1800s.
Wait, when was it? When did it happen?
This is embarrassing. I want to say this was around about the 13th, 14th century, so 1300s up to like the 1400s. I might be getting that wrong, but this is a Middle Ages before the Renaissance War.
But the name...
To give you an idea of the timing, because maybe this will help you more. I'm struggling to remember the century off the top of my head. So you know your Kings of England song, right?
Absolutely, I do.
All right, so if I'm remembering correctly, this is one that starts with Richard II and goes on until Henry V, if I'm remembering the order correctly. No, it goes on past Henry V. Henry. Okay, so yeah, I don't remember the order of my British kings as well as I
Henry,
do. But
Stephen, Henry, Richard, John.
But
Henry,
this is the
Ed,
war.
Ed, Richard, then three more Henrys. Join our song. Edward, III, Henry, Ed again.
Did you keep track of the Henry so you knew where to stop?
No, I wasn't counting.
Okay, so I do not remember for sure which Richard it was, and now that I'm saying it, I'm second guessing myself. Was it even Richard? But this is the war, the 100 Years' War. This is the time period in which Henry V comes into his own.
Okay.
When Henry V is going to become king during this time. He's not king at the start of it, but he's king like the middle, close to the end of it. I don't think he's the king at the end of it, but he's the king in the middle part. Some very famous moments come out. So the play King Henry V, his St. Crispin's Day speech, the Battle of Agincourt, arguably one of the most famous battles in all of history.
I know all of those names.
Yeah,
I don't know what they are.
All of this is part of the 100 Years' War. Joan of Arc is part of the 100 Years' War. She's at the end of this period.
Oh, okay. Point of reference. Got it. Okay.
So like I said, this is so this takes place. It's
Should
embarrassing
I look it
that
up?
I can't remember the centuries. Yeah, I want to say it's 13 to 1400s.
My job here is to Google when you don't remember. 100 Years' War. Wikipedia says 1300s? Am I looking at this right? 1337 to 1453.
Okay, so I was right. Yeah, 1300s to 1400s. Yay me!
Yay you!
So yes, so like I said, they didn't call it that at the time. Nobody called it the Hundred Years' War until the historians in the 1800s or so came up with that name.
That's
And the
several.
reason,
Okay,
let me finish because you're going to enjoy this.
I'm gonna
The
love it.
reason they decided to call it that was because they could not think of a better name for the period. So they just called it the Hundred Years' War. They didn't break it up into these different wars and organize it like that. No, they just lumped it all in together and decided to call it the Hundred Years' War.
That's freaking amazing. So what you're telling me is that the 100 Years War period is so insignificant that they just took a bunch of stuff and like lumped it together and like, 100 years, whatever.
No, not insignificant at all. Highly significant.
If it was so
Very
significant, then why didn't they have a better name?
I don't know. I wasn't there at the time.
Okay.
I don't know why they chose to solve that, but it's now become tradition, so we can't break it now.
Yes, we can.
So even though we still call it the 100 Years of War, I think just about any historian worth his salt is going to recognize that, okay, this war is more properly broken up into at least 3 different periods. The beginning, the middle, and the end.
That's what I'm saying. They just lumped it together and gave it a stupid name. It must not be important.
And so I want to point out another thing that is traditional about war. Today, we tend to think of war like we've learned about World War II, for example, and that there's a constant fight going on somewhere, some part of it.
Right.
No, back in this time period, there weren't always soldiers somewhere always fighting it. There were often months, if not years, perhaps even decades in between battles during this period.
But it's all considered one war still.
It's all considered one conflict. So the most simplified, boiled down version of it is that, so if you remember, because I know we've talked about this and I believe you should know this, the first king of England is William of Normandy, who is arguably a Frenchman, descended from Vikings, but a Frenchman.
A Norman, at least.
Yes, a Norman. Part of the difficulties that William and his successors are going to have for the next couple hundred years is this. They are the kings of England, but because of their holdings in Normandy, they are still vassals to the king of France. This is an awkward situation to be in because you usually can't be king of one land and then a vassal to somebody else, or a servant, a follower, if you will, to somebody else.
Is a vassal more like a nobleman or more like a peasant?
A vassal is definitely more of a nobleman. The vassal is the guy who you put in charge of your lands. The king owns all the lands in France. Well, not all the lands at this point in history, but to simplify it, the king owns all the land in France. This land has been given to your family under your control. You are his vassal. When the king comes a-calling to you, you give him what he asks for. That's within his rights to ask for.
Okay.
So the king of France has that kind of authority over William and his descendants. But William is king of England. So William owns a substantial amount of land and property that do not belong to the French king, that shouldn't be part of his vassalage. So this is where the rub comes in. Now, William does spend most of his life still in Normandy. I don't believe he goes back to England, or at least not that often. And when he does, he doesn't stay that long.
I remember we mentioned this before, and it's just so stupid. How can you call yourself the king of England if you don't even live there? But whatever, keep going.
Okay, so your confusion is one of the things that points out continues to be a sore spot, if you will, or a confusing point for between England and France for the next several hundred years, arguably for even longer than that.
Yeah.
So when we've come to the beginnings of what becomes known as the 100 Years' War, England has lost almost all of its land holdings in France, with one exception. And believe it or not, it is not Normandy. It is actually the southwestern part of France on the border with Spain and the coast. That is the one part, and I don't remember what its name is off the top of my head. So
Portugal?
No.
What did you say?
Portugal is on the western border of Spain and Spain alone.
Okay, tell me where we're looking again.
So Spain and Portugal make up the Iberian Peninsula.
Yes, that's France, southwest Europe.
Yes, southwestern Europe. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So right above Spain is France. And on the coast, on the westernmost coast of France is a sliver of land that still belongs to the English king.
Got it.
But all the other lands that William and his descendants have gained or lost through claims, marriages, wars even, have all been lost. But they still own this part of it.
Okay.
So I do not remember exactly how this comes up, but if I am remember correctly, for whatever reason, the French king decides, as has been decided by other French kings in the past, they don't like the idea that England owns this land. So the French king decides that, okay, he's gonna take this land, or he's gonna do something to the English king that the English king at the time doesn't like. Find out who it is, because I want to say it's Richard II, and it's really bothering me that I don't know.
Tell me the year again. Wait, so this is at
This
the
would have
beginning
been at the
of
beginning of it, so this would have been around
1300s.
1337.
Okay. The king. It should say it in this Wikipedia article, right?
I would hope so.
I see Richard II, but maybe hold up.
I remember now, or at least I think I remember now.
What?
I think I remember now. Part of the problem was that Richard II, if it was Richard II, he was arguably next in line for the throne, because the only person closer to the previous king to have a legitimate claim was a woman. And his argument was that, okay, no, a woman can't be Queen of France. I should be the next king. And the French nobles were like, heck no, that ain't happening. So that might have been what started the war. So that would have been the thing that the French denied William that he wanted. So William would be the one Richard. So Richard is the one who did start the war, and it was because the French did something to him that he thought was wrong or didn't like.
Well, I don't know the answer because it's complicated. I'm like trying to skim it. I'm looking for a sentence that said King blah 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 of England blah blah blah. I'm not seeing that. I can't just skim it and find the answer.
Edward III and then Richard II. So it was Edward III who was king at the beginning. Was Richard II? He was the Black Prince, wasn't he?
I don't. What?
I don't
He was he African?
No.
Well,
sorry. Okay. At this point in the history, whenever a character got the title Black in their name, it was not because they were of African descent. It was usually because they were bad dudes. They were scary and dudes,
like a black sheep or just like darkness.
I'm getting all mixed up now. All right, so whoever was king at the time, and yes, I'm kicking myself, and I'm waiting for Andy to be laughing along as he's listening to saying, "I know who the king was."
And I mean, if we want to pause and you could Google it really fast, you could find out and pretend that you remembered.
It's fair for me and my arrogance to give our audience reason to belittle me and laugh at me if they know something that I don't know. All right, so whoever the king was, he was getting shafted. He was the next in line to the throne, or at least he had a more legitimate claim than any other contenders. And the most forefront person that the French had to offer was a woman, the daughter of the king who had passed away, I believe.
Louis X.
Okay,
because I'm super smart like that.
So this is going to lead to war because, as is often the case, whenever the person who thinks he's supposed to be heir feels like he's not getting what is owed to him, like William thought that he was getting shafted when he was supposed to get the throne of England, but Harold said, "No, we're not going to give it to you," and the Danes also tried to take it from him. Anyway, we're going backwards there.
Yes.
So yes, he gathers up an army. He launches an invasion of France with the goal of pressing his rights there and take it to, if he can't get the crown, okay, well then he's just going to conquer the whole thing.
Okay.
All right. So like I said, there are 3 different periods for this. So the first period is not a very in-depth period. The English are going to land their armies in the north. They're going to attack a couple cities. They're going to burn a couple to the ground. They're going to move along, and then they're eventually going to head up north, if I'm remembering correctly. So this is just in the northern parts of France. They never go like deep into France with this invasion. Okay. The French are going to send an army to stop them, but this army is defeated at famous battle whose name I can't remember for.
Must not be that famous.
But it was a famous battle, and it's messing with me that I can't remember the name of. This was if not the first time, this was a definitive moment in which the English proved that their longbows were the superior weapon and will be the superior weapon for most of this war. The English government at the time was basically making almost a significant number of its own population in every village train with the longbow, so that whenever there was reason for war to come around, they had skilled men ready to use these things.
Like reserves.
Yep. So that's why they had an abundance of longbowmen. And yes, at this battle, whose name I can't remember, the longbows are going to prove themselves invaluable because they are just going to slaughter wave after wave that the French are going to say. So when the war begins, the English superweapon is the longbow, and the French superweapon, which is going to continue to be their super weapon through much of the war, is going to be their heavy cavalry, or at least that's what the French
What's
think.
heavy cavalry? Just horsemen?
Knights on horseback.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, with full armor and everything like that. So
that's why they were called heavy, because of all the armor. Got it.
Oh, and light cavalry is usually so heavy cavalry.
I thought I was making a joke and you went with it. Okay.
Heavy cavalry, the goal is to trod down your opponents. Heavy cavalry, by equivalency, is a tank. Light cavalry, by equivalency, is a recon unit. A guy on a motorcycle maybe has a rifle or something. He's to scout around, and he's going to take pot shots at you if he can.
Cool.
Light cavalry also tends to involve horse archers, but the Europeans weren't big on horse archers, despite plenty of other people having much success with horse archers. Anyway, yes, at this battle, the French also have crossbows, but the crossbows are going to prove themselves to be not worthy of comparison to the English longbows. If I remember correctly, the crossbows do hit you with more power, so if they get in range with those things, they're going to kill you. But the range on the longbows, if I remember correctly, is insanely superior to that of the crossbows. And also because the crossbows are a mechanism, they break down, they have maintenance problems, and you have to be a skilled person to use them, whereas the longbows are fairly easy, they're easy to replace, and the English have tons and tons of a reserve that have been working with these and know how to use them.
Well, and they're slower to load, too, the crossbows are.
So the French are going to get an embarrassing, crushing defeat, and the English are going to win a lot of claims, a lot of lands. And that's, for the gist of it, that's how the first phase is going to end. There's not going to be a clear, like, oh, okay, the French surrender to England and England gets all its land back. No, that's pretty much it.
Okay, pause. Sorry, I need you to repeat this a million times because I don't remember anything. Okay, so there's this land in northern France.
Yes.
The English say, this is ours. French says,
No.
No. Okay, no.
Oh.
I was getting confused with something else. Okay. King of England, who may or may not be Richard II, thinks that he has claim to the French throne.
Yes.
Because Louis X died.
Yes.
And all he has is a female.
Yes.
So Richard a daughter. So the English king, who may or may not be Richard II, is like, I'm going to go to France. I'm going to take my throne.
Yes.
And so he tries.
Yes.
Got it. I'm with you.
So to be clear, though, if I remember correctly, he doesn't... He might actually launch an assault on Paris. He might even take it.
Okay.
Is
Paris in the north?
Paris is in the northern part of France, yeah.
Oh.
So I'm getting a lot of... So I know of various campaigns, and I'm probably getting the order of them mixed up. And to be honest, the first phase of the war is not the one that I'm overly familiar with.
Okay.
So yeah, there is the campaign in the north, which may or may not have attacked Paris. If he did take Paris, he didn't stay and maintain it. He took his army back up north their goal was to hit Calais, and from Calais they were going to get back on their boats and sail back to England, having proved his point, having taken spoils, having taken some new cities that he thought.
But he didn't take the throne.
Correct, he didn't take the throne.
But he was like, that's good enough.
Yeah, so sometimes there's the recognition that, all right, we're not going to be able to subjugate the whole thing, so our goals can be different for now. And I'll admit, I do not remember exactly what his goal was, or if I ever even knew what his goal was at the time. But for anyway, and that's actually what for the first part of the first phase of the war. That's pretty much mostly what this is going to be. It's going to be English incursions into French territory. The occasional French attempt to knock out the English incursions or to take that bit of land that the English still controlled in the south, and the French army is just going to get embarrassed over and over again. They're not going to be winning any victories here, at least no big victories. The English are just going to trounce them over and over again.
I have a name for the 100 Years' War.
What?
It should have been like the War of English Bullying or something like that.
Okay, I suppose that's fair. So then we get into the second phase of the war.
Okay.
So this is the one that I'm a bit more familiar with. This is where Henry V comes into play.
Okay.
So a couple of different theories here as to why Henry V launches his invasion. Whatever the reason was, he also builds up an army and he invades France. And he pretty much does the same campaign plan. He invades in the Normandy area, so the same place that the Allies are going to later on invade, which I think is where the first invasion took place also that we just talked about.
Okay.
So he's going to invade that same spot. He's going to attack a lot of the same cities, capture, siege, loot a lot of those same cities.
Okay.
He's going to make the same course. He also may or may not have stopped in Paris and sieged it or taken it before, again, turning back up north.
Okay.
Now, this point is where the Battle of Agincourt happens. So, like in the first campaign, the French are going to eventually organize an army, and the French Dauphin, because I don't remember if the French have replaced the king yet. I don't think they have. I think the Dauphin is the quasi-leader, but I don't think he's been named king of France. I might be remembering this wrong.
They've been without a king for, what, 50 years?
It happens.
A while.
It happens sometimes.
And what is this word you're saying?
The Dauphin. I might be pronouncing it incorrectly.
It's a French word.
That was his title. So I don't know if that was the title of him because he wasn't king, or if that was his title. I don't remember that.
Is this a situation like Gondor and the...
Sure.
What were they called?
It was the Steward of Gondor.
The Steward of Gondor.
So he was running the show instead
Is that
of
what
the
this
king.
is?
So the thing that I think is different here, though, is that the Dauphin is not recognized as the legitimate, unquestionable guy running the show until there's a king. There were some factions that were not in favor of the Dauphin becoming king.
Oh.
If I'm remembering correctly.
But he was running the show?
Not entirely. So again, this is where one of the things where I might be getting my details all mixed up.
That's fair.
But so whoever was in charge of France at the time, like with the first invasion, builds up an army and goes to hit Henry V. And again, it's the same scenario. The French massively outnumber the English. The French are the significant number of their army is made up of heavy cavalry, and the significant number of Henry's troops are made up of light infantry, longbow-men. And actually, I don't think he has a cavalry force, or at least not a significant one by compare.
Well, how would they get the horses there anyways? They had to come by boat.
Yeah, they have boats.
And
they can buy horses
horses take up a lot of space.
That they're raiding.
Oh, that's fair. But they wouldn't be trained in okay, that's fine.
Horses are trained in warfare.
But like every random peasant's horse that they steal along the way.
Okay, yes, those ones would have been more useful to them as pack animals, but
okay.
Okay.
That's fine, go ahead.
So this is where the Battle of Agincourt takes place, which is arguably one of the most famous battles in all of European history.
I know I've heard that name a million times.
Yeah. So, again, this is a spot where the longbows are just going to prove themselves, and also the French are going to prove themselves to be absolute idiots. So, to be fair, in the beginning, it would seem that, all right, the French weren't actually idiots because the ground, if I'm remembering correctly, quasi-favored them. The battlefield is taking place on an open plain for the most part. Foolish thing for the French, and the French have the high ground at this point. So, from their equivalency...
They have the high ground?
Yes, don't say it. Don't do it.
Don't try it, Anakin. No. I have the high ground.
I quit. End the episode right here. I'm done.
Go on.
So yes, by the French perspective, their heavy cavalry is going to be able to charge downhill and just mow right over the English.
Okay.
All right.
Great plan.
A couple of things that don't work out so well for the French. First off, the battlefield is flanked by some fairly dense enough forests.
Yeah.
So that's an ideal place to hide unknown troops. The French don't hide troops in there, but it's kind of foolish. Granted, I have hindsight on my side.
Yes.
It seems foolish that the French wouldn't have assumed that the English would have had some troops hiding in there. And also, it rains before the battle, which means that ground that the French cavalry intends to charge down is going to be muddy.
Oh no!
So
better than lava.
So the morning comes. The French do exactly what the English expected them to do. They charge downhill at them. Henry has had a good portion of his men staked at the bottom of the slope. They know that the ground is muddy. They know Henry has this all planned out.
Okay.
Supposedly, all the sources that I've seen. So, he has his men along from forest edge to forest edge at his end of the battlefield.
Okay.
They put some anti-cavalry stakes in front of them, so that's something that is going to blunt the cavalry charge. Even some of the most well-trained, disciplined horses are going to stop and buck their rider once they realize that they're about to run into a spear or something like that.
Yeah, animals aren't stupid.
And the whole time that the French are trying to, so first off, they can't charge, and they realize that because the ground is muddy, but they are moving down the battlefield. And the whole time that they're doing this, they come under fire from
the
British longbows. And if I remember correctly, also the forest's kind of thin as it heads downhill towards the English, which means that the French are forced to compact themselves more and more, bottleneck more and more as they're going down this muddy hill.
Wait, who picked the battlefield? The French?
Arguably, the French are the ones that picked the battlefield.
Okay, go ahead.
The English longbows just pelting the French cavalry as this is going on. Eventually, Henry does have men hidden in the woods. Naturally. They come out, and I don't think it's complete envelopment, but they more or less surround the French army,
Dude.
and it's a slaughter. They absolutely devastated the French army. It's a major victory. The casualties are very much in favor of the English. I don't remember how many casualties they had, but it wasn't that bad. And Henry is going to take an awful lot of prisoners. It's going to be a tremendous victory for him.
Wow.
If I remember correctly, it's only called Agincourt because Agincourt was like the nearest town, and I want to say it was like 40 miles away or something like that.
40 miles? That's not close by.
It was the nearest one, or at least the nearest one of significance.
Okay.
So that's what, because one of the things I remember reading about was that they had trouble for a while deciding what are we going to call this, and they eventually settled on, well, okay, we'll call it the Battle of Agincourt.
Yeah. Well, because you have to have some name. You can't just call it the field or the 100 years.
And so it's that night, though, that Henry's going to do something nefarious, arguably one of the most nefarious things that's been done, at least by Henry and possibly by any king.
Okay.
So I don't remember exactly how it comes up. Either there's a rumor or there's a shout. Something happens at night that gives Henry reason to believe that the French army aren't completely defeated, that they are still out and about somewhere, and that they are going to be attacking, or that an attack is imminent or something of that nature. And being frightened by that, considering that he has a large number of French prisoners in his camp, he orders the execution of the prisoners so that he doesn't have to fight a two-front battle at night.
That's dirty. But
So,
it makes sense. It makes sense, though.
It makes sense from I want to win this fight and I don't want to lose, or I don't want to die fight, but as much as it may make sense, there's also it's also undeniable that killing prisoners is a big no-no.
Well, yeah, is that one of those things that has always been generally accepted as like, no, that's ungentlemanly, that's not okay?
So it's unfair to think of it like that because, again, you run into the problem of different mindsets, different cultures in particular.
Yeah. But we'll say Europe.
So it would seem to me that at least today, the consensus, and even back at that time, the consensus was that no, you don't kill prisoners. It wasn't necessarily because that's just the wrong thing to do, more so because you can ransom them, maybe. More so that the potential for ransom them, it's the right thing to do. But at the same time period, in plenty of other places in the world, including in Europe, there were plenty of guys around there that didn't have any problem with executing prisoners.
Yeah.
So one of my favorites to quote has always been Shaka Zulu. So much
Art of
later
War.
in history.
No.
Did you just say
Who's
Shaka Zulu, Art of War?
Who's the Art of War guy?
Sun Tzu?
Oh.
A couple thousand years earlier than Shaka?
There was a Z. I really thought that's where you were going.
That was your
But then you said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was excited that I recognized something.
You didn't recognize something, apparently.
I'm sorry.
Are you?
It seems like Sun Tzu would have said something about this situation.
I'm sure he did say something about prisoners. I don't remember what he said. Okay. So it seems to me, I could be wrong, but I would guess that Shaka Zulu and Sun Tzu would be at opposing odds at this time.
So what did
If
Shaka
I remember
say?
correctly, Sun Tzu said something to the effect of, "In battle, you must give your enemies the illusion that they have a possibility of retreat, so that they won't fight to the death. They won't fight like lions." No, that actually doesn't go along with what I was about to say. Sorry. All right. So going back to Shaka Zulu.
Okay, Shaka Zulu. Got it.
Shaka Zulu said that it is wrong to let an enemy escape. Or I don't remember his exact words, but the point was basically, it is wrong to let your enemy escape because he's eventually going to come back. So Shaka would have said,
imprison
no to prisoners, kill your prisoners, or not necessarily kill them, but at least capture them and keep them in prison.
Don't let them get away.
Because if they get away, then they'll come back to hurt you. So there's been a different mentality of what to do, what is right to do with prisoners or whatnot throughout history. There have been plenty of people that have said, no, treat prisoners like as if they are honored guests, and there have been plenty of people that have said, prisoners, that's just more people I got to feed. Heck with that. And then there are other people that have been like, oh, some of you are good, and I'll keep you alive for my prisoners, and others of you are not worthy of me, so yeah, I'll just execute you. There's no true... Like so many things that are determined by culture, there is no universal law. There's just what we've gotten into the habit of doing. And there's almost always going to be somebody around who's willing to break that culture, or a different culture that opposes or goes against the culture of another.
You just came off really strong against Henry V killing all the prisoners. It sounded like it was more of a universal.
No, that was not my intent. My intent was just to communicate that this is arguably the most nefarious thing that he's going to do, and I was about arguably also the most nefarious thing that's going to happen in the war, the whole of this war. All right, so again, same thing though. Henry does not stick around for the whole of the conquest. I believe he goes back to England, but he does keep his armies in France this time, or at least he sends other armies from France. Because by the time we get to the third phase of the war, the English have control the entire north of France. So there's I think it's the Seine, but I could be wrong. There's a river in France that's shaped kind of like an L. It cuts off the north and the east part of France from the southwest part of France. And the English, if I remember correctly, they now control everything to the north and east of that river. The French only have the lower part of the country.
Dang.
Yeah, I think part of this was because the Brittany, are you familiar with where Brittany is?
No, I think did she move back to Utah?
What
are you talking about?
Sorry, Brittany is the name of a province in France. That little spear that I once called the nipple of France. That little spear in the north part that goes off to the west.
I'm aware.
That area is called Brittany. If I remember correctly, Brittany was not part of the French kingdom at the time. I believe they were independent. And I think that they were on the side of the English for at least the beginning portions of this war. So the English didn't control that. At least I don't believe they did.
Okay.
But they did have most of the rest of France. And the English are famously besieging the city of Orleans, or I think they pronounce it Orléans or something to that nature. I don't remember how to pronounce it.
That's fine. They're French. We don't care anyways.
If I remember correctly, there's some who have theorized that, okay, if Orleans falls, then the English win, because that's the last major city, or the last hope the French have of stopping the English from crossing the river and just getting into the rest of France. So this is the point in time where Joan of Arc is going to show up.
Got it.
She comes from the western part of France, if I remember, so in occupied English territory, if I'm remembering the geography right of the time. But she's established a kind of a rumor for herself as being blessed by God, and she
saw a freaking angel. The angel told her to go lead the French troops.
Yes. So
don't be so flippant about it.
Yeah, she goes to the king. She delivers her message, and she is credited as being the hero who will eventually liberate the siege of Orleans. So the city is free. And then there's going to be another pitched battle where the English are going to try to resume the siege, I believe. And she convinces that army to just turn away, to walk away. I don't remember if it's because they're scared of her, or maybe they were low on supplies or something. There was different rumors about why that happened. But anyway, she frees the city. And it's at this time that the French decide to crown the Dauphin, even though they don't have Paris yet, because I don't believe they're going to retake Paris before Jan is killed.
Okay.
So this is the turning point of the war. Things start going better for the French at this point, because Jan is just a boon to their morale.
Did you call her Jan?
That's, if I remember correctly, that's how her name is actually pronounced. It's Jan.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Oh, you're throwing me off. You have to call her Joan, because everyone in America knows her as Joan.
I will try to remember that.
Do you really call her Jan?
I think whenever I use the full title, Joan of Arc, I say Joan. But whenever I'm just referring to her by just her name, I think I say Jan.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
She is, because of her victories, because of her influence, so obviously the English are going to be very, very upset with her. So they're going to put a huge bounty on her head. She is eventually captured in battle, not by the English, but by one of their allies. I don't remember who. And they're going to hold her for ransom, waiting to see who the highest bidder is going to be, because they could sell her back to the French, or they could sell her to the English.
Right.
If I remember correctly, the French don't even try. Supposedly there is some money donated by some of the French nobles and even some of the commoners to pay the ransom for her. But the Dauphin, who is now king, takes the money and keeps it for himself instead. So the English just outbid him. So the English get her. And yep, she's tried as a witch. There's a really good movie about this. It takes a lot of historical liberties, but it's still a good movie called The Messenger. I don't remember her name, but the girl from Fifth Element is in it. The girl with the orange hair from Fifth Element.
Oh,
She plays Joan of Arc in it.
I know her name. Mila.
Mia Jovovich or something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah,
Mila
so
Jovovich.
I
Or
don't remember her name, but yeah, and I think she does a really good job in it. It's got a lot of other good actors in it, like Dustin Hoffman. Enjoyed his part in the movie. But
Huh.
anyway, so it's a good movie. It's rated R, so don't
You
let your
don't
kids watch
recommend
it.
it.
From a historical perspective, I think it's a good enough movie, an interesting movie.
Right.
So that's how Jan ends up getting knocked out of the picture. She's eventually going to be tried, found guilty for heresy, and she's going to be burned. And that's the English. I think we're hoping that with this, they're going to crush the French morale, but it doesn't. French morale stays high. At some point at this tail end of this conflict, the French are going to finally have something that they can bring in to outmatch the English longbows. Cannons. They're gonna get a hold of cannons.
Whoa, we get cannons now?
Yes, they may. If I remember correctly, they're gonna make their debut in this conflict at the tail end of this conflict, and they're gonna. So they're now, granted, they're not as effective as the cannons that we tend to think of. Like we tend to.
Okay.
I think most people, when they think of cannons, they're thinking like ship cannons, or they're thinking like Napoleonic era cannons, things like that. Okay, no, we're not. We're not at cannons like that just yet. We're very primitive yet still effective.
Are we talking fireworks like the rockets of like China?
No, we're talking a little bit more. We're talking more like a big fat tube, likely large enough for a person to crawl inside. Maybe not quite that big on primitive wheels that you really couldn't aim or anything of that nature. You point it in the direction you want, and it was kind of a hoping game that it's actually going to go as far as you want and hit the thing you want it to.
Dang.
Yeah, so that's going to help the French out as well. Eventually, the English are going to completely withdraw from the continent. They're even going to lose that sliver of land that they had down in the beginning of this conflict.
Right.
So the 100 Years' War, even though there are many, many English victories, and even though at one point the English, I think, control more France than the French do, eventually the French are going to win, and the English will lose everything they have on the continent.
Dude. Okay, I looked it up. The Dauphin, or however you pronounce it, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. It looks like Dauphin. That was just the prince.
Okay.
It was the heir apparent, the king, the eldest son of the king.
Okay.
So whoever the king of France was at that time, because obviously we are way past the conflict of like Louis X dead. Oh no, it's a girl.
Yeah.
So we're clearly way past that. But yeah. So he was the heir apparent to the throne at that point.
And if I'm again remembering correctly, I think one of the reasons for why the 100 Years' War kind of ends at this point is not so much just because, okay, well, the French have gotten everything back. In part, the French might have gotten everything back because I believe it's about this time that the War of the Roses begins. So the English have their hands full with more important, or rather more close to home matters.
Yeah, because I was going to say Henry V, that gets us like close into the War of the Roses time. Dude, so English are like, never mind, we got our own issues.
Something like that, yes.
Talk to you later, France. That's crazy.
So the 100 Years' War is probably, with the exception of the French Revolution, I don't think that there's any point in history where the English and the French hate each other or are as just eager to fight one another, destroy one another as has ever been. And I think that's also the high point of the English in ever having any chance of actually coming out of, or I would dare say that the 100 Years' War is also the point in time where there might have ever actually been an end to their rivalry. Because, like I said, the English, they had a significant portion of France. It's possible that they could have pressed, and discounting the possibility of rebellions and how difficult it would have been to hold on to France. That's the closest that England ever came to subjugating France, and France never comes close to subjugating England during the whole of their rivalry.
Right.
So, and if I remember correctly, yeah, they're rivals from almost the point that William takes over all the way up until Germany gets unified. And it's only after Germany gets unified that France finally decides that, okay, well, we still don't like the English, but we've got bigger problems now.
I wonder, do they have a better name for this war in France? Because it seems like it would be a bigger deal to French history than it is to English history. And we call it the 100 Years' War because that's what the English call it. So, do the French call it, the War of English Aggression or something? The War of Northern Aggression?
It's possible. I do not know what the French call it.
Cool.
Like the Battle of the Greasy Grass or Custer's Last Stand or the Battle of Little Bighorn or the Battle of Manassas Junction versus the Battle of Bull Run. I do not know what the French call this war.
They've got to have a better name for it.
If you look it up in any English textbook, it's going to be referred to as the 100 Years' War.
But they didn't call that till the 1800s?
Yes.
That's so
I don't remember.
weird.
I want to say it was like in the 1830s they gave it that name, but I'm not positive.
That's so weird. What did they call it before that?
I don't think they called it anything.
It was just...
So keep in mind, you're thinking about modern day curriculum where that didn't exist in the past.
I guess so.
But
you have to have a unified way to talk about things.
I'm trying to remember when, and if I recall correctly, there have always been historians. There have always been people that wrote history, but history as a study, as a focus, as a college aspect kind of a thing, that is actually all fairly new. I want to say it didn't become a real thing, like a professional thing, until even the early part of the 1900s, the tail end of the 1800s.
No way. Don't believe you.
Yeah. So there were like societies, there were organizations that were interested in it, but as far as it being an academic thing, no, that's actually very recent.
That's crazy.
Recent by compare, like within the last 100 years, maybe a little over 100 years at this point.
Yeah, but as we've established, 100 years is a long time.
Because I want to say it was something that came out of the progressive era, the idea that this was going to be a regular, legitimate field of study instead of like a hobby kind of thing.
Wow.
I'm probably not saying the words right, but there was definitely some shift in the focus of the academic pursuits of it, the academic licenses and credentials, if you will, of being a historian. That changes that comes into some kind of new legitimacy in the progressive era or around about the progressive era.
Very cool.
Yep, I think so. History is cool.
Sometimes it is.
So I wish I could remember the name of that battle, because there are some other battles that takes place in the 100 Years' War that are some just pretty cool stories where, for the most part, there are plenty of times where the French should win. I mean, they have the numbers, they have the resources, they have the land, that's their home territory. And yes, on at least one occasion, they had the high ground. Some of the other occasions that I'm thinking of, no, the British had the high ground, so that was bad for the French. And there's some pretty cool battle stories that have come out of some of these, but for the most part, all the famous battles that I'm thinking of, for the most part, it's all basically the same thing. The English form a line, and their longbows just repulse attack after attack after attack by French crossbowmen or heavy cavalry.
Yeah, but now the French have cannon.
Yes, and cannon are going to be able to outrange or at least outmatch the longbowmen, or at least offer them stiff enough competition.
Very cool. Good for them.
I would imagine the English would disagree with you, but
well, I guess so.
That would be something that I'd be curious about. I wonder how many. First off, I wonder how many British and French people today even know that the 100 Years' War happened, much less any details about it.
I'm sure they know about it. American kids learn about Joan of Arc. I'm sure they learn about the 100 Years' War.
There are also American kids where if you ask them about the Civil War, they're going to think you're talking about the Civil Rights Movement.
No. Okay, they learn about it, whether they remember it or not.
That's one thing. I've seen videos of the people on the street where they go up to people on the streets and they ask you, what was the name of the first American president? And they'll say something like, Lincoln. We have presidents? I didn't know that.
No, they say Lincoln.
The point is that there are plenty of people that can't answer these basic questions. So I wonder, what the average person in Britain or France thinks about the 100 Years' War. I wonder if there are some Brits today who are thinking that, I wish we'd finished the job back then. I wonder if there are some French people today who deny that they lost at Agincourt or some of these other battles. I don't know.
Well, there's idiots in every country.
There are differing opinions, yes, in every country. There are foolish people in every country.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a 5-star review.
If you'd like to hear a future episode with more information about today's topic, contact us on Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Married to History Pod.
Also, please contact us if you have a silly question idea or if there's something from history that you would love to learn about.
Just be sure to specify in your message if it's indeed silly or serious, because we don't want to treat a genuine quest for knowledge as a joke.
Talk to you next time. Bye.
Oh, not bye-bye yet, because I did just remember there is another movie about this.
Another movie.
It came out fairly recently. You remember Robert Pattinson, the kid from Harry Potter?
Vampire dude.
Oh, yes, in the vampire movies. Okay. He was in a movie. I don't remember what it was called. It's killing me that I don't remember what it's called. It was on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but he was in a movie where he played the Dauphin at Agincourt. The movie was the end of the movie is the Battle of Agincourt. The movie is about Henry V and his rising to become king, and then going over and fighting, which will eventually lead to Agincourt. And yeah, the Robert Pattinson plays the Dauphin.
Good for him.
Yeah. I do not know if the Dauphin was actually at that battle or not, but in the movie, he plays the Dauphin, and he's there. And he plays an arrogant Frenchman, I think, very, very well.
Maybe I'll watch it now. Maybe.
It might also be rated R because...
Then I won't.
His story movie with battles in it, and they tend to like any movies with action in it to get R ratings.
Well,
they don't give
too
R
much
ratings
blood.
to ones that have pornography and whatnot in them.
Yeah. Bye!
Bye.
Okay. I think we're ready.
I sure hope so. This better be a good one.
I think it's a good one.
That helps me not.
It's gonna be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I will ever be without knowing what the topic is ahead of time.